The National Desk, America's News Now.
Happening now, new numbers show Americans are still struggling as inflation remains at a 40-year high. Rent prices breaking records, gas prices over $5 per gallon.
It's getting bad, ma'am. I'll be honest with you, getting real bad.
How long we'll be feeling the pain at the pump and why officials say their hands are tied. A high-stakes primetime hearing. The committee investigating the January 6th attack, revealing never-before-seen video and witness testimony.
I saw friends with blood all over their faces. I was slipping in people's blood.
The major moments, the Republican response, and how we got to this point. The House voting on gun reform bills after an emotional day on the Hill. A student who survived the Uvalde shooting.
I grabbed the blood and I put it all over me.
And the parents of a child who didn't make it home.
I left my daughter at that school, and that decision will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Testifying before Congress, their stories and the Second Amendment debate still brewing in the Senate. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez. On this weekend edition, we're taking a look at the big headlines of the week and a look ahead at what to expect. We're following several big stories for you this week. A look at the latest inflation numbers and another record-breaking week at the pump. The gun debate heating up right now in Washington as the House passes gun reform legislation. The January 6th committee releasing never-before-seen evidence in its first public hearing, and the president sharing a new plan to deal with the crisis at the southern border. We start with the latest inflation numbers just out Friday. Prices up a record-breaking 8.6% year over year for the month of May. Now, drilling down into those numbers a bit for you. Food up more than 10%. Energy prices are 34% higher. That includes a 48% spike in gas prices. Shelter, including rent, up 5.5%. Shelter accounting for about a third of the inflation report. Now, this week, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said inflation is at, quote, unacceptable levels. She admitted she was wrong when she called it transitory just weeks ago.
There's no question that we have huge inflation pressures, that inflation is really our top economic problem at this point, and that it's critical that we address it. I do expect inflation to remain high.
Secretary Yellen also pointing out gas prices would be even higher if not for the release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, right now, gas prices still climbing, expected to reach over $5 a gallon by Monday. Across the country, lawmakers being urged to stop prices from climbing even higher. The National Desk's Satra El-Nashar has details on their plans from Capitol Hill.
High prices weighing on everyone's mind from Main Street.
It's getting bad, ma'am. I'll be honest with you, getting real bad.
To the White House.
Inflation is the bane of our existence.
The national average for a gallon of gas hitting a dreaded milestone. Price pain not felt since July 2008, when a gallon of regular was $4.16 or $5.47 in today's dollars.
A senior administration official tells me they're at the beck and call of global energy prices, destabilized by Russia's war in Ukraine. And it's a message they're taking to the American public as frustration at the pump sets in.
The issue is that we have a lower supply globally. Gasoline comes from oil. Oil is traded on a global market. There are fewer barrels of oil on that global market, which is driving up prices.
Arguing the president's already using the biggest tool he has, tapping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But 75% of adults say President Biden is at least partly responsible for the inflation rate, according to an Economist YouGov poll taken in the past week. Republicans also blaming the president, arguing his focus on climate change discourages domestic oil production.
I have never seen a whole-of-government assault on an industry like I've seen from this administration.
From gas to food, most Americans expect inflation will get worse, according to a new Washington Post George Mason University poll.
Keep hoping that eventually something will happen and the prices will go down.
9 in 10 say they're starting to bargain hunt.
Just budget really, really carefully on what you spend your money on.
And 3/4 are cutting back on extra spending like going out to eat. As tough as $5 gas is, it could get worse during hurricane season. Much of the country's petroleum refining capacity is along the Gulf Coast. A tough summer ahead, the Federal Energy Information Administration forecasts prices will stay elevated through September, averaging $4.27 per gallon. In Washington, I'm Audrey Najar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
On Capitol Hill, the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol gearing up now for its next hearing. This week, the committee held its first public hearing, airing on primetime television, showing some never-before-seen footage from that day.
I am not allowed to say what's going to happen today because everyone's just going to have to watch for themselves.
House members, they're all walking over now through the tunnels.
The committee also sharing video of the depositions of former Attorney General Bill Barr and Ivanka Trump, both saying they knew the election was not stolen. Now, the most emotional testimony coming from Capitol Police Officer Caroline Edwards, who was knocked unconscious as rioters breached the Capitol barrier.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think that as a police officer, as a law enforcement officer, I would find myself in the middle of a battle. I just remember that moment of stepping behind the line and just seeing the absolute war zone that the West Front had become.
3 hearings are planned for the coming week on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Also on Capitol Hill, the Senate still negotiating the details of a series of bills meant to reform gun laws here in the United States. The House passing its own gun legislation Wednesday. It raises the minimum age to purchase an assault rifle from 18 to 21. It also bars the sale of large capacity magazines and institutes new rules that dictate proper at-home storage. It also addresses the sale of ghost guns. It's expected to undergo significant changes in the Senate, though. And just hours before the vote in the House, lawmakers heard from survivors of recent mass shootings and the families of those who died. Their words, graphic, intense, heartbreaking. One of those speaking, a 4th grader at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. She was inside the classroom when the gunman opened fire. She says he first pointed the gun at her teacher, said goodnight, and shot her in the head. That terrified 11-year-old says she went to another part of the classroom and did the only thing she could think of.
He shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and put it all over me.
Now, while she survived that massacre, 19 other children and 2 teachers did not. The parents of one of the victims, Lexi Rubio, telling lawmakers about the last moment they saw their 10-year-old daughter alive.
I left my daughter at that school, and that decision will haunt me for the rest of my life. Somewhere out there, there's a mom listening to our testimony, thinking I can't even imagine their pain, not knowing that our reality will one day be hers, unless we act now.
A new Quinnipiac poll shows most Americans are in favor of stricter gun laws. 74% support raising the minimum legal age to buy any gun to 21. That breaks down to 91% of Democrats, 76% of independents, and 59% of Republicans. Democrats have a majority in the Senate, but have to work with Republicans to get gun legislation passed due to the filibuster. It can be beaten, but can it be removed? Our fact-check team investigates.
There are mixed opinions on whether or not the filibuster should still be used in Congress. Connor with our fact-check team back again tonight, joining me for this one. We've heard a lot of calls for its removal, but how exactly could the Senate get that done?
We found a couple ways that this could happen, but the most straightforward option is to formally change the Senate rules, which requires a 2/3 majority. And not all Democrats are on board, so they don't have the votes to make that happen. But there is another way called the nuclear option, and it only takes 51 votes to
And
vote.
how often does the Senate use that?
Rarely, but we've seen both sides of the aisle play this card a few times. In 2013, Democrats used the nuclear option to confirm Obama's cabinet nominees, and in 2017, Republicans used the same option to end the filibuster for Trump's Supreme Court picks. But senators are slow to use it, and it's called nuclear for a reason, because critics say it could blow up the Senate and hurt the political rights of the minority party. But there are other ways to get around the filibuster that would have more support from senators who are on the fence, like Joe Manchin. One way is to only allow talking filibusters and another is to reduce the 60-vote threshold to 55 votes. The bottom line is, at one time or another, both Democrats and Republicans have pushed to remove the filibuster. But there's mixed reviews on whether that's actually going to happen, because when your party's in the minority, it's a very useful tool.
Very good, Connor. Thank you so much for that context. The Fact Check team will continue to follow developments on this and several other issues. You can also read this story, links to where they found all of their information tonight on our website, thenationaldesk.com.
Children 5 and under may be able to receive the COVID-19 vaccine as early as June 20th. FDA vaccine advisors plan to meet next week to review data submitted for these vaccines. The CDC will make the final call on how they should be administered. And to prepare for the release, the White House COVID-19 response team working to curb vaccine hesitancy right now in parents. A recent Kaiser Family Foundation survey found 80% of parents will not vaccinate their kids right now. White House officials plan to roll out 10 million doses, and they expect that they'll be available within 5 miles of where 85% of children 5 and under live. Lead in the water American children are drinking. Coming up, the 3-year effort underway in one state to clean it up and why it's taking so long. Plus, summertime struggles. The food bank trying to get ahead of summer hunger. You're watching The National Desk, America's News Now. You can watch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. till 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time. You can also watch anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We're back after this. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. From a summer food program in Maine to an NFL star coaching young people in his Georgia hometown, we're taking the pulse of America. We start in Texas, where schools statewide have been ordered to do a safety check after the shooting in Uvalde.
We're ready, for the task at hand and working on it feverishly right now.
The Safety Center has less than 3 months to check all schools in the state's 1,200 districts for their emergency operation plans, address campus safety needs, and conduct in-person random intruder detection audits.
Is TSSC up to it?
I think it's realistic because I think that's what Governor Abbott wants us to do, and that's what we're going to do. That's our plan.
While funding for the safety checks comes from the state, the organization may need to rapidly expand its staff, which numbers less than 90.
We may have to increase that staff number, and I think that's a true possibility in order to get to all those districts and campuses.
Conducting intruder tests during June and July, when many campuses are closed or operating on a limited basis for summer school, may not be as effective as the fall.
It's pretty easy to guard against an intruder when there's nobody at school and they're all locked down during the summer.
Besant says to expect the intruder checks to continue this fall. Teachers' organizations question that strategy.
If we have somebody pretending to attack our schools, that's added stress. It's added stress to the adults and the children.
With summer break right around the corner, it means an end to a big relief for many Maine families.
Because school isn't in session during the summer, you're not able to take advantage of the reduced or free lunch programs.
Parents may need to make trade-offs, deciding themselves to go hungry or skip other necessities.
The problem is multifaceted. It's emotional, it is physical, it can be a traumatic experience, not only for the parents, but for the kids.
But organizations like Good Shepherd Food Bank try to prevent that. It's the hub of Maine's largest hunger relief network.
We work with over 600 partners.
The organization distributed over 31 million meals last year alone.
Food insecurity is in every community in the state of Maine, really from the southern part to the northern part, in urban areas and rural areas.
For those needing good meals, there's the Summer Food Service Program, which has sites all over the state.
A lot of people don't know about the Summer Food Service Program and know that it's an option for themselves and their families.
Your donation can go a long way.
We can turn it $1 into 3 different meals.
As a kid, I always wanted to see professional players, to be around them, you know, go to those camps and things like that.
For NFL superstar Kareem Jackson, his dream of sharing his passion in his hometown just became a reality.
And know that anything is possible.
Teaching over 200 students football fundamentals, the Maconite hopes to motivate the Macon youth.
You can make it from Macon, Georgia. You know, just got to set goals for yourself, be dedicated to it, and dedicated to the process of actually chasing those goals and set your bar high for yourself.
Accompanied by a fleet of teammates teaching children how to be quick on their toes, Jackson hopes that children get the bigger picture.
Teach them the fundamentals and also for them to chase their dreams and chase those goals.
Coaching the youth and underserved kids, he says children are teaching him the biggest touchdown is giving back.
Just want them to dream big, definitely work at it, set the bar high for themselves and do whatever they have to accomplish every goal that they set for themselves.
Since news broke about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, lead in drinking water has been a part of the national conversation. Part of that conversation focusing on schools, most of them built before lead-free pipes were required. According to the EPA, lead in children's blood can lead to serious health problems. But as of the end of last year, just 18 states and the District of Columbia required schools to test their water. In Maine, testing has been the law for 3 years now, but hundreds of schools have yet to get that testing done. The National Desk's Dan Lamparello has been following this issue, questioning why it's taking so long and how it's impacting kids.
From water fountains to faucets, water fixtures in schools across Maine are under the microscope as the state tries to figure out how much lead children are exposed to.
We want to know what the worst case scenario is so that we make sure that we can protect, all of the water that is being consumed in the schools.
Amy LaChance is the director of the Maine Drinking Water Program, who says no level of lead in water is safe to drink, and some schools have seen extremely high levels. Data shows a sink and a bubbler at the Vivian Hussey School in Berwick had a reading of nearly 550 parts per billion. That's more than 1,300 times higher than what's considered elevated.
I'm sure some parents have been surprised and certainly concerned about that.
But despite a law requiring schools to test for lead, hundreds still haven't. According to data obtained by the I-Team, about 47% of the 720 schools required to test have yet to submit results.
Do you feel like schools have been proactive in this, or do you think some waited to the last minute?
I think they're doing the best that they can.
The state says a combination of factors, including COVID, have delayed testing at some schools, but they did see a big influx this month as the original deadline approached. Now they're extending things until the fall.
Do you have hope the remaining schools will be able to meet that fall deadline?
Yes, definitely have hope that they will be able to meet it. We will do everything we can to help.
Districts big and small are on the list, and while the state will be watching their progress, parents seem to also be pushing to find out how safe the water their kids are drinking really is.
Parents are asking their schools if they don't see their results out there. So I am sure that we will get full cooperation on this.
That was Dan Lamparello reporting. Many of the schools that have seen elevated lead levels have closed off those fixtures from drinking. Some have even made bottled water available while they work to fix the problems. Rising gas prices hitting Americans hard coast to coast. We're talking to one senator about the efforts underway to give people some relief. Plus elected officials being pulled from office by the very voters who put them there. Why some progressive prosecutors are getting a lot of backlash. We're back after this. As gas prices continue to rise, a community college in Tennessee is changing its schedule to give students a break. The Southwest Tennessee Community College says classes will be virtual on Fridays for several weeks because students just can't afford the commute with these higher gas prices.
This is really just a red flag for students and parents everywhere that if gas prices don't go down, more colleges, more universities might be taking the lead that Southwest Tennessee Community College set and force their students back online just to try to save them a few dollars here and there.
Well, this week, our Scott Thuman asked Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn how and if the federal government can offer some relief.
This is something that the White House could do something about immediately. You know, on day one, Joe Biden started attacking the energy sector, the oil and gas industry. He did it with Keystone Pipeline. Then he moved forward with limiting federal leases and then not giving the drill permits that were necessary for those federal leases so people could explore and drill and pump that oil. They put Alaska off limits. They've put offshore drilling and exploration off limits. All of this is going to drive up the price at the pump. And when you look at the fact that Keystone and having certainty on that, that's 830,000 barrels of oil a day that would bring in. Keystone would have been finished by the end of this year had Joe Biden not stopped that project. Those are things that would make a difference. This White House could make a change in policy today, but they will not do it because they want to force everyone into electric vehicles. We have a grid that cannot support an all-electric energy fleet, and we are an energy-based economy. So what people are doing is trying to find workarounds. And you're looking at West Tennessee, you're looking at areas where people have to drive 30, 60 miles a day to get to their job or their education. And they're saying, we have to have some relief. They are holding this administration to account.
Senator, you recently tweeted that, quote, inflation is crippling the American economy, but all Biden's Treasury Secretary can do is throw her hands up and say, sorry, I was wrong. There's a solution. Stop spending trillions of dollars and unleash American energy. You say unleash American energy, but that's something that doesn't just take the flipping of a switch. There's a long process involved, even if policies were to change from the White House, right? So that couldn't really quickly ease some of these burdens, would it?
Well, I beg to differ a bit on that. When you talk to people that are in the oil and gas industry, whether they're wildcatters or independents or a major oil company, what they will tell you is that there are wells that are capped right now, that there are permits, drill permits that they have applied for that they cannot secure. And this is to drill on leases that they already have. What the oil industry needs is certainty. When you look at the oil futures, the gas futures, you know that they're looking at certainty. Right now, we are importing 670,000 barrels of oil per day. So if you change your policy, you show that you're going to allow for this drilling. You allow going back into Alaska, offshore, into areas in the Gulf states where there is the infrastructure.
So a shifting commitment would be a big part of what you're pointing to there, right?
Exactly right.
Well, we also asked Senator Blackburn about student loan debt and the Biden administration's plans to forgive up to $10,000 ahead of the midterm elections. The full interview posted right now on our website, thenationaldesk.com. $300,000 worth of drugs seized at the southern border. Still ahead, how they were found and who the president is working with to address this crisis at the border. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. An Alabama man is dead after police say he tried to force his way into an elementary school. Officials say he tried to take an officer's gun, and that's when another officer opened fire. 2 people in Pennsylvania now recovering after being rescued from a chocolate tank at an M&M factory. And Kim Kardashian reportedly denied tickets to Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee party at Buckingham Palace. Those stories and a whole lot more right now at thenationaldesk.com. Let's take a look ahead at some of the big stories we're watching for you this week. The Supreme Court expected to release opinions twice this coming week. The nation still waiting for that opinion that could overturn Roe v. Wade. The House will vote this week on a bill boosting security for the justices and their families. And Wednesday, both Moderna and Pfizer will go before an FDA panel to get approval for their COVID vaccines for kids under 5. Shocking new details in the investigation into the Uvalde school shooting. A bombshell report suggesting law enforcement knew people were still alive while they waited outside. Coming up, why police decided not to confront the killer. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. Watch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. till 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time. We're back after this break.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Here's a look at our top stories. Friday's inflation numbers show prices up 8.6% over May of last year, breaking the inflation record once again. The January 6th committee hearing gearing up for another round Monday after revealing new evidence at its first public hearing Thursday night. And the debate on gun legislation continues in Washington, D.C. A Senate committee is set to discuss its version of a reform bill Wednesday. Voters in San Francisco, unhappy with rising crime, recalled their progressive district attorney this week. The outcome now signaling an uncertain future for other so-called soft-on-crime prosecutors across the country. The National Desk, Kayla Gaskins, explains from Washington.
They were given an opportunity to voice their frustration and their outrage, and they took that opportunity.
Voters in San Francisco, one of the country's most democratic cities, fed up with homelessness soaring and crime surging, ousted its progressive district attorney Tuesday, sending a loud and clear message.
We can solve homelessness. We can curb crime.
350 miles to the south in Los Angeles, Rick Caruso, the latest Democrat to run on a tough-on-crime platform, cemented a spot Tuesday in the race for mayor against a more progressive foe. These results come at a time when a majority of Americans say they worry a great deal about crime.
More Democrats attempting to distance themselves from progressive criminal justice policies as crime rates drag their party's poll numbers into the mud.
Crime still spiking in New York City, and 76% of New Yorkers say they fear they'll become a violent crime victim. Its new tough-on-crime mayor, Eric Adams, blames Manhattan's progressive prosecutor, Alvin Bragg.
The courts have to prosecute. Everyone has to do their part.
Moderate Democrats warning that candidates who are branded soft on crime are dragging down the party.
These extreme activists have
taken hostage the party, and we're trying to take it back.
As tough on crime candidates gain momentum.
They want to send a clear signal to the criminals that their reign of terror, this era of lawlessness, is over.
Heading into the midterms, Americans placing more faith in Republicans to handle crime. 75% saying they're more likely to vote for a candidate who supports funding the police.
I sent the Congress a request for $300 million in this year's budget to deal with hiring cops, to retrain cops.
Biden hoping a pivot to tough on crime rhetoric helps his party keep their majority in November, at a time when voters are losing confidence in how progressives handle crime. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Several DAs could face the same fate as Chesa Bodine. I'm back tonight with Connor from our fact check team. So Connor, who are some of those other officials across the country potentially at risk of being removed from their own office?
The main one that a lot of people are focused on right now is George Gascon. He's a progressive district attorney in Los Angeles and is facing his second recall attempt since taking office in 2020.
So why are some voters there in the Los Angeles area targeting him, and why do they want to see him out of office?
This all comes back to Americans wanting law enforcement to be tougher on crime. When he first took office, he immediately implemented progressive reforms. But with LA's crime surge, Californians want Gascon to rethink these policies. According to the LA Times, violent crime of all types is up over 7% compared to last year. And a survey from the Public Policy Institute of California shows a record 41% of LA residents view crime as a major worry, and that's the highest in any region of the state. But Gascon isn't the only DA that should be concerned. DAs from New York County, Chicago's Cook County, and Philadelphia have all been labeled as progressive prosecutors. And those are all places where homicides went up during the pandemic. And murders across the U.S. jumped nearly 30% in 2020 from 2019, which is the largest single-year increase ever recorded by the FBI. And a recent Gallup poll shows worry about crime among Americans is at its highest since 2016. The bottom line is the public is looking for leaders to crack down on crime, and we could see a few more recalls if these progressive DAs don't change some of their goals.
Certainly something to track as we head into the midterm election season. Connor, thank you. The Fact Check team will continue to follow developments on this and several other important issues. You can also read this story with links to where they found all of their information tonight on our website. You see it right there, thenationaldesk.com.
More than $300,000 worth of fentanyl now off the streets after being intercepted at the southern border this week. Officials with Customs and Border Protection say they searched a vehicle at the Hidalgo border crossing this week. That's where they found 22 pounds of the drugs. That seizure happening some 1,500 miles away from the Summit of the Americas, where President Biden met with several heads of state to address the migration crisis happening right now. The president pledging to find a solution for the problem.
Safe and orderly migration is good for all of our economies, including the United States. It can be a catalyst for sustainable growth. But all unlawful migration is not acceptable.
The president is calling his plan the Los Angeles Declaration. He says it's a commitment by several governments to keep people safe and crack down on crime. This week, officials with the Department of Homeland Security said its sting operation is already taking shape. They're working to disrupt smuggling rings, sneaking drugs and people across the border. Authorities say they've arrested nearly 2,000 smugglers in the last few months, seizing property and filing charges. The U.S. has deployed more than 1,300 people across Latin America and invested more than $50 million in this effort. We're also learning new tragic details about the police response to last month's deadly elementary school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. The New York Times reporting there were originally 33 students and 3 teachers in those connected classrooms, and the report suggests law enforcement knew that more than a dozen students were still alive during the 77 minutes that they waited outside. The police chief reportedly delaying the decision to enter the classroom because a lack of protective gear would have led to officers possibly being killed. Investigators are working to determine if any of the 21 victims could have been saved had they received medical attention sooner. Making an appearance this week at the White House, actor and native of Uvalde, Texas, Matthew McConaughey, who delivered a plea for a bipartisanship when it comes to gun reform.
Responsible gun owners are fed up with the Second Amendment being abused and hijacked by some deranged individuals. These regulations are not a step back. They're a step forward for a civil society and the Second Amendment. This gun responsibility issue is one that we agree on more than we don't.
So what more should America do to crack down on violent crime? As lawmakers try to hammer out a bipartisan solution on Capitol Hill, some are asking how much of this starts at home. Our Megan O'Halloran spoke with former Boston Police Superintendent-in-Chief Daniel Linsky.
Oftentimes we find individuals who engage in activities that lead them down a road of violent crime, not to have stable home lives, not to have parents who are there for them, with school education issues, with emotional support issues, with making sure they're mentally healthy and physically healthy. So oftentimes not having a support network, either your a nuclear family at home or an extended family can sometimes lead to challenges where young folks will get involved in activity that then leads to violent crime, for sure.
From a law enforcement standpoint, policing crime on the front lines there, will tougher gun laws deter violence, and is there enough enforcement in the judicial system to see it through?
Yeah, well, we've got gun laws on the books now that aren't enforced, and there has to be consequences. We've got individuals who are engaging in violent activity that are walking in and out of our justice system. So no matter how many laws we pass, we need to enforce the ones we have. There are some improvements that can be made to gun laws. For example, I shouldn't be able, if I'm on a terrorist watch list and can't get on a jet for fear that I would cause some harm on that jet, why am I able to go in and buy a firearm while being on a terrorist watch list? If I've got, a physical ailment and I'm suffering seizures and I crash my vehicle, the doctor is going to notify the registry of motor vehicles in my state that I have a 6-month period where I can't drive a vehicle until I'm proving myself healthy. Well, if I'm seeing a psychiatrist for suicidal idolation or homicidal idolation, I'm being treated and given medicine, why isn't there a medical procedure to put somebody who's in a mental health crisis and limit their ability to get a gun while they're in that mental health crisis? So I think there's some opportunities to change, but the challenge is, as soon as you mention changing gun laws, both sides dig in and no one listens to the other. We really got to listen and find some common sense solutions, some common ground. That being said, people can still do things with other means of hurting people if they want to. But I think there is some area of improvement that we can find some common ground on.
Yeah, they were trying to do that today on Capitol Hill. In fact, in that hearing, another point was raised today. With all that money funneling through national security to keep this country safe, why can't we seem to keep kids safe at school? Georgia Representative Andrew Clyde believes the Uvalde shooting was preventable, and he blamed the president for, quote, being uninterested in pursuing tighter security in schools. Do you believe that's the case?
Well, I don't know about that. I know that we can do more things to secure our kids. We can have, security officials that are trained to protect them. We can have architectural design systems and programs and layers of security. We can have policies, procedures, and trainings. But that being said, I can secure a facility extremely well. I can make sure the kids are perfectly safe inside the school. That doesn't mean that at recess, when they go outside, I can do anything to keep them safe. It doesn't mean when they're leaving at 3:30 at night, I can't keep them safe as they're all exiting across the property. So if someone's motivated, they can seek harm. But we should be investing in whatever infrastructure, policies, procedures, technology, and programs we can to limit that risk and mitigate that risk and try and keep our kids as safe as possible.
Yeah, a lot of work to do on all fronts to come up with a solution here. Chief Linsky, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Still to come, a new report finds issues with COVID numbers and how they were reported early in the pandemic, the state where it happened and why others may find similar issues. And a man opens fire on a car with a little girl inside. The road rage exchange that led up to this shooting. Next. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. till 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time. You can watch anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National Desk team of reporters bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in Florida, where a new report finds the state reported COVID-19 data incorrectly early in the pandemic.
The first-page summary of the Auditor General's report lays it out pretty clearly. 3 state agencies, the Florida Department of Health, the Department of Emergency Management, and the Agency for Healthcare Administration, are responsible for inaccurate or incomplete COVID-19 data reporting. Serious findings which could have impacted the state's response to the coronavirus threat and the public perception of the danger presented by the virus.
It was really intense. I mean, we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know why it was happening.
Jen Puckett is a Palm Beach County nurse. She tells CBS 12 that the first few months of the pandemic on the front lines were worse than most people realize. She wasn't surprised to hear that this new report found issues with the way the state was reporting COVID-19 deaths.
We've seen a lot in this last 2 years, and I don't think that it was reported correctly.
Auditors found that the state didn't list more than 3,000 COVID-19 deaths due to typos or clerical errors, and reports of other deaths were often delayed. Jen wonders if a more accurate picture of the threat in those vital early days might have led officials and hospital administrators to divert more resources for staffing and supplies.
A lot of people died, but could they have prevented that death?
In Washington, a man and his 5-year-old daughter lucky to be alive after they were targeted in a road rage shooting. Anthony says he and his daughter Avery were shot at 6 times after Anthony flicked off another driver for cutting him off. One bullet landed just 2 feet away from Avery.
More than anything, my daughter. You know what I mean? I definitely couldn't imagine, and I couldn't live with myself. You know, I'm having a hard time dealing with the guilt of already, you know, by, I guess, putting her in that situation.
Police say this is the 31st shooting on King County freeways this year. Law enforcement still searching for that other driver. In Maryland, Baltimore city officials say they're short more than 1,000 election judges just 3 weeks from the primaries there. Some blame COVID-19 on the judge shortage, but others say it's because many people vacation in the summer. But nearly everyone agrees without election judges, voting centers can't operate.
So we have now 103 locations around the city that need to be staffed with judges to assist the voters. Without the election judges, we would not be able to have polling places.
The city election director says he has fewer than 900 people signed up to judge. 2,200 are needed. Another crisis affecting America's children.
I started having anxiety when I was about 12 or 13 years old.
Coming up, why kids are having trouble finding treatment. And rising prices, the #1 issue for voters across the country. Our Washington Bureau breaking down what this means for the midterm races, coming up after the break.
Welcome back to TND. Our Washington Bureau covers Capitol Hill and D.C. every day to report on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. 2 of our correspondents, Scott Thuman and Atra Elnishar, they're here with us to share their insights and analysis. Scott, a wake-up call for Democrats this past Tuesday, the latest races where voters punished Democrats who are viewed as soft on crime.
Yeah, and this is highlighted by something we saw in San Francisco where Chesa Boudin, the district attorney there in San Francisco, has been recalled by voters because of that very label, that branding, that he may have been soft on crime. You had prosecutions down and crime going up. This is something that has Republican strategists just salivating because they're wondering, can they replicate this same theme in elections across the country, not just in cities, not just for DA's offices, but perhaps for Senate or House seats, for governor's seats. And can they say, we are the party that's going to be tougher on crime, keeping you safe at night, Now, the only caveat is you do have plenty of Democrats who say that philosophy of being so-called soft on crime is not what we believe represents our mission as a party. In fact, it's a very small population of Democrats who are still calling for things like defunding the police. We believe that this society should be safer, and we also support measures that would do that. So there's a bit of a party split there, but Democrats for the most part are saying that's not who we are. Republicans are saying it's absolutely who they are. Vote Republican.
Right, and those Democrats becoming more vocal after what happened on Tuesday. And while public safety is growing as a key issue, the biggest issue for voters, the economy. Atra, what's the latest on inflation and gas prices?
Steve, any hopes that the worst of inflation was in the rearview mirror were absolutely shattered. Friday's inflation report and gas hitting a national average of $5 a gallon, according to Gas Buddy. That dreaded milestone came on Thursday this week. So economists widely predicted that the new annual inflation rate would be 8.3%. It was 8.6%. Terrible, tough inflation report. And once again, the key drivers of that inflation, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, was housing, groceries, and gas. To state the obvious, things you just can't live without. So it's not like the American people can cut back on those necessities. They're going to have to cut back elsewhere. Specifically, some of the biggest price increases we saw were new cars, plane tickets, bread, bakery items, and that shouldn't come as a surprise, of course, as Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and that supply chain, or part of the supply chain, has just been absolutely pummeled, and it's far worse in other parts of the world. Some bright areas of this inflation report we got on Friday. We're seeing some electronics get cheaper. It's a great time to buy a TV or a smartphone. Meat at the grocery store ticked down a bit, but overall, this was a really tough inflation report, a tough week for Americans who were looking for a break.
And you mentioned those $5 gas prices. We'll be watching very closely to see how that ripples through the economy over the coming weeks. Scott, quick takeaway on Thursday's select January 6th committee hearing, billed as a bombshell by some Democrats leading up to it.
Some of what we already saw was replayed as far as some of the videos, some of the context, but a lot of it was dramatic. It was new, different angles, emotional to watch as you saw crowds rushing into the Capitol and overtaking police. One of the big takeaways was this story that Republicans who had supported former President Trump's efforts to overturn the election also may have sought presidential pardons. So now there's a lot of digging on Capitol Hill to identify who those members may have been. How far does that story go? We'll have to wait and see, because this is just one of 6 hearings on this issue. What kind of impact it'll have on American voters and viewers, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, the committee trying to prosecute the case, but it's in the court of public opinion, and we know how that goes. Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman and National Correspondent Atra Elnishar, thank you. Eugene, back to you.
And thanks to our Capitol Hill team. 9 million children across the country suffering from an unseen disease. How soon parents should be screening their kids for anxiety, and why, even if diagnosed, it may be difficult to treat. America's children are struggling with a mental health emergency. Nearly 10% of them were diagnosed with anxiety before the pandemic, and experts believe that number has soared even higher. But there's never been a push to universally screen all kids for anxiety until now. The National Desk's Lisa Fletcher explores the new recommendation and investigates crucial gaps in treatment in this Spotlight on America.
The issues facing America's kids are arguably more serious than ever. from the interruptions of a global pandemic to new fears of violence in the classroom. And even the kids who appear the least impacted are often suffering in silence, like 17-year-old Lauren Williams.
I started having anxiety when I was about 12 or 13 years old. It's the smaller things that make me anxious. When I'm doing things like talking to strangers or just trying to get simple tasks done, that's sometimes where it feels like my anxiety is the worst.
Doctors estimate that more than 10% of America's kids are experiencing clinical anxiety. That's upwards of 9 million children. How do you discern between what are regular, anxious, stressful, typical moments for a kid versus what requires treatment from a clinician like yourself?
I think that avoidance piece is a big one. So if their kids are saying they're not going to school or they won't leave their parents to have a sleepover with their friends, those are usually flags for physicians to think maybe this might be helpful to have additional support.
Dr. Lilia Andrew is a clinical psychologist at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. She supports a recent recommendation by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force to screen all kids for anxiety starting at age 8.
I think the need is there to have a system of identifying it as a standard practice of care and then a referral network where, okay, if I identify that my patient is feeling a little anxious, what are the resources I can give to parents and families?
Are there enough Dr. Andrews out there to handle the number of kids that could be referred to specialists?
It's really difficult right now to find a provider. A lot of the wait lists are quite long.
Spotlight on America wanted to find out how long. We contacted top providers in 6 major U.S. cities. Of the dozens we talked to, the vast majority had no immediate availability to see a child with anxiety. In Washington, D.C., many providers weren't taking new patients or had up to a 4-month wait. In Buffalo, one provider we were referred to had a wait list of 9 months. In Seattle, it's not just a long wait. One large organization told us it had no providers available at this time, period. And in Columbus?
Yeah. We're looking at 4 to 6 weeks before we can get in. Should I be expecting to be waiting weeks or maybe a month to get in? Probably.
The CDC acknowledges some families may be placed on long waiting lists to receive care. Based on our cursory sampling, with no final screening guideline yet in place, supply already isn't keeping up with demand, making it more difficult for kids who need help to get it.
The large issue that COVID has revealed is that we need more therapists, we need more providers, more psychiatrists, social workers, licensed mental health professionals, just the availability for these services for families.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
And that'll do it for this weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget you can watch us live from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines at thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.